Hello, everybody. It's Jen and the team from the FASD Collective Shifts That Work, where we are talking about survival, success, and everything in between. And today we've got a really great conversation for you where we are going to start thinking about our kiddos and the ability to receive a diagnosis and how that can look for each of us. One really cool thing is our kids were diagnosed at different ages, and the way that that has played out has been really interesting. So, we know also we just want to recognize that there are some families who may be going down this FASD route and are thinking, I'll never be able to get a diagnosis. Having not being able to get the confirmed alcohol exposure or wherever you are, diagnostics might be a challenge. And we just want to kind of recognize that that may be tough. And we want to support and help you with that. And maybe there's a way to navigate around it. But we want to talk about like the benefits of being able to understand what that diagnosis meant for our children, at least, and how we navigated the conversation around having these brain-based challenges. And because my kiddo was diagnosed when he was 5, I want to start us off with that piece. So for us, it was a fantastic tool to help us do what I call name it to tame it, right? I was able to be in a place where, unfortunately, at the time, the Florida Center had a 9-month wait list, just with the way that our funding was working. And so I was in a time of crisis. I felt like I was running around with a fire hose, putting out fires so that our family could navigate everyday life. And so we made the decision to do a paid clinic. And yes, plug, our Florida Center program is able to do paid clinics for individuals outside of the state of Florida. If you need information on that, please let us know. You can send us an email at fasd@thefloridacenter.org and we can fill you in on those details. But so for me, we made the decision, we went through and worked to get Jay's diagnosis. And from that, we gained a lot of really great insight and understanding of brain-based challenges and how to help him when he's having a hard time. And it's been a tool that we've utilized kind of as he's grown. To give him the opportunity to not feel maybe some negative feelings on why he has a hard time doing some things. And then one of my favorite parts about with at least the way the Florida Center does our diagnostics is we use a neuropsychologist. And with that cognitive assessment that they do for us, we also get to see where our kiddos have strengths. So when we're able to know where their brains have a tough time, and then we're able to know where their strengths are and find a way to kind of meld that together, moving forward and having the diagnostic tool of the FASD assessment for my kiddo was incredibly helpful. It gave me a way to be able to advocate for his needs, especially at school. And we've had some really tough times kind of navigating what school looked like for him as far as placements and getting him his free and appropriate education. So for us, having that specialized evaluation really was a key component to us getting to a level of success. It did not open a bunch of doors for services necessarily with the FASD diagnosis. It did not get us to this bright shining star of, okay, life is no longer hard, but it gave us guidance. So for us, I was really thankful to be one of the people who are considered to have an early diagnosis before the age of 6 or by the age of 6. And then that was a tool that was in our pocket to be able to utilize. So Pam, your kiddo was also diagnosed at a younger age. Can you tell us a little bit about for you how that worked?
Sure. My story would be the opposite of yours. Um, to answer that specific question, we adopted our son And the first year, everything was magical. It was like living in a fairyland. And then I had a very busy child, a very, very busy child that people were always ignoring. Oh, no, it's fine. He's fine. And I knew it wasn't fine. So I persisted and went to a clinic where I thought they would tell me he has ADHD. And that's really all I was prepared for. So when they said FAS, just FAS, I was devastated. I was heartbroken. I was devastated. We packed up our home within 3 months and moved to Florida. We were living in Illinois. We moved to Florida in search of services and just a climate where he could be outdoors more and have more opportunities because we were living in a really rural area. And I continued to be devastated for several years. Um, I know it's probably not appropriate to say, but it's my truth. I have a lot of alcoholism in my family. And so I was raised to understand that there's a lot of shame with drinking. And so I carried that shame um, to even have to say fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I mean, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings by saying that, but it really it weighed on me that was our truth. And, this was 20 years ago when he was diagnosed. So autism was everything. And I just wanted it to be autism. Everyone knew autism, everyone understood autism. There were millions of books on autism. And I could have found, I mean, I had a pediatrician who was like, no, I don't think it is FAS. I think it's some sort of autism. I could have went down that road. But I knew that wasn't the truth. And so it's been really hard for me to embrace the FASD. I know that's probably not the right answer, but that's just the truth. And I do embrace it now. And we did. By the time Alex was in second or third grade, I was really fighting for no, this is different than autism. This is how it's different than autism because they're very different. And seeking those very specific, well, even first grade in kindergarten, seeking those very specific accommodations for FASD. Um, and then around kindergarten, we always told Alex, of course, but I wanted to teach him. He didn't care. He doesn't care still, I don't think. Um, but now he's 21 and I am trying to teach him more about this diagnosis so he can advocate for himself. And we're again recircling. Do we tell people it's FASD? People don't understand this still. Employers, vocational rehab, job coaches don't believe us, don't understand it, don't know what to do with it. So I'm still again left wondering, why are we even saying this? Can we say it's a brain based injury? Because it is. And so, like, I think just parting shots, like, if you're hearing me, I hope I'm not offending you. Sometimes we're in the messy middle of life. And my thoughts right now are I do want Alex to know what he has, but I also want us to think about who's safe to know these facts. And a random employer may not yet be safe to know all the facts. A random employer may need to know that Alex will need a list and he'll need someone to check in with him. But we're really kind of working on just deciding who's safe to know these truths. And I hope that some of that makes sense.
Yeah, Pam, those are such really great points, because you're navigating a journey that my kiddos and I haven't gotten to yet. So, definitely things to keep in mind because this journey is lifelong, right? And then how does that play out for our loved ones as they grow? And on that segue, as they grow, Rosemary, tell us a little bit for you guys about what getting the diagnosis for your kiddos looked like and how that was kind of that brain-based challenge conversation in your home.
My children have a 3.5 year age gap between them. And we came to diagnosis completely opposite of each other and in the opposite order that you would think. We spent a lot of years with my daughter, who is the younger child, not knowing what was going on, but knowing something was wrong. And there was a lot of therapies that didn't work. There was a lot of misunderstandings about what her behaviors were really trying to tell us, or her challenges with growing, everything was difficult. And it was when she started having some significant mental illness challenges that we were finally led to a diagnostic center. And not only does she have, she's got the full syndrome, so FAS, plus she has an intellectual disability and some mental illness diagnoses that just keep on growing. And now that she's a young adult, and it was hard to hear it, but it was also helpful to recognize that it wasn't my parenting that was causing this. It was the brain-based challenges that she has. And because she has the intellectual disability, she cannot fully understand her own diagnoses, any of them. So I have to handle it in very small increments, and more like as a 23-year-old, what you would tell a 10 or a 12-year-old. And that has worked for us. But knowing the diagnosis, whether we could get services or not, it just made all the difference in the world in how I started recognizing and understanding once I learned about it. And it was literally sitting in a class for my daughter that because we were in another state, and the folks from Minnesota came to do a conference, and I was sitting there and the light bulbs were like sparking in my brain, like, oh my gosh, they're explaining my son perfectly. How did I miss this all these years? Because it wasn't the history that I was told about him. So I never connected the dots between alcohol exposure. And then we are fortunate to know some of the other family members, and I was able to do some digging and found out that, in fact, he was also exposed. He was 15 by his diagnosis, and it was only because of my daughter already being diagnosed that I learned. And he is capable, he's much higher functioning on the umbrella, and he's been able to understand it himself. Now at 15, he was of course pissed off about it, and didn't want to recognize it, but it also opened my eyes to a lot of the things I was doing for my daughter were now applicable for him, and it made things move so much better, especially with advocating at school, which was extremely difficult for both children. And once I learned, I worked very hard to compel the district that we were in to at least learn the basics so that they could understand my children better. And that really helped. And now that my son is 26, he's doing pretty well. And he does not like to disclose his diagnosis at all. I respect his decision. He's a very introverted guy. Although we privately will discuss it, and I remind him when he needs to hear it, when a challenge he has is most likely related to it. And then we work through how to cope with that. So he is 99% independent, but he's appreciative of the 1% when he knows now to ask when he needs help. Now, my daughter, we just, anything that's steady is the best I can hope for, but also not allowing our district to discount that she can't learn, because I knew that wasn't true. And, when she was 11 years old, I was told, her kindergarten reading comprehension was about as good as it was going to get. And I was like, no, you're not going to discount her until she's out of school. And she made it to a fifth grade comprehension, which is very close to functional literacy. And because I knew what was causing her brain to have the challenges it had, I also knew that there was more hope than just a kindergarten level of comprehension. And it means the difference of understanding safety things. Now, she doesn't have the best safety awareness, but she at least can read signs and know what they mean. And to me, that was everything. So I'm very grateful that we did get the diagnosis, even though they were late. And particularly for my son, it's made a huge difference.
I love it. Gosh, and I love that you brought up the umbrella, right? Because so many of our kiddos end up with this diagnosis or that diagnosis or the thing. But when we think about FASD as the spectrum and how all of these things can fall under the umbrella, Crystal, I think you're a great person to help us understand the umbrella and the variety of how our individuals can present. But will you tell us about your kiddos and what getting the diagnosis was like and how that was impactful for you guys.
Yeah, we get, FASD, the S is the spectrum, and we see the full spectrum at our house. So I have four with FASD. Some are lower functioning and others are higher functioning, and some in between. So we had known, we always knew that there had been alcohol exposure. And my first experience trying to get some sort of diagnosis because I didn't know what was going on. I just thought I was losing my mind and everybody was crazy around me. But it was at, like Pam, it was at an FASD. Oh boy. It was at an ADHD appointment. My pediatrician had been after me for years to take my boys to be evaluated for ADHD. I finally went because none of us were sleeping. Things were always in chaos. So we finally went. We had this big, long um, appointment. And at the very end, the doctor, the psychologist asked me if I knew anything about, could they have been exposed to alcohol? And I said, oh yeah, they were both exposed to alcohol. And he said, yeah, well, he's got FAS. And then the appointment ended. So, and that was when he was probably around 8 or 9. So I always count that as a very informal diagnosis. Even though this was a psychologist, there was no education, there was no telling me what that was or what it meant or what I should expect or what I should do, nothing. So we went several years then knowing that this is likely, checking off the boxes for a lot of what we were seeing with our kiddos. And uh, I delayed then getting a real diagnosis at the Florida Center because I felt like I knew what I needed to know, right? I had no idea how in depth uh, their reports would be and exactly how it would show me, what their strengths are, where are they struggling. Their formal diagnoses came when they were all like 15 and up by then. Um, and so a lot of the things, I had studied on my own. I had learned a lot of things on my own. I was in a lot of different support groups and learning, coaching groups, things like that. But then getting, knowing so much detail about where they were functioning, I just wish so much that I'd had that early on, because there were a lot of things that were missed in school. My oldest daughter, um, well, I have a first batch and a second batch. My oldest daughter, my second batch, um, dropped out of school in 10th grade. And at that point, we just knew that she had a learning disability. So it was later that year, between the ages of 16 and 17, once she had dropped out of school, that we had further outside diagnostics going on, not just in the school. But that year we found out that she had an intellectual disability and they diagnosed her as having autism, which I argued with them for a long time on that because I still don't know that the autism diagnosis is correct. But just how significant that is that my poor daughter went all those years through school undiagnosed with an intellectual disability and autism, and the struggle that she had. She's now 23 years old, and she has nightmares to this day about school trauma, and just how hard it was. So that's hard. That's hard to deal with and, hard to reconcile.
Yeah, it definitely can be. I think though that as a general message that we as caregivers here in this group would say that getting information on our kiddos and their brain-based challenges was empowering. Would we all agree that that was
Oh
kind of
yeah,
a helpful tool for us?
100%.
Yeah, and I think that's what I share most with other families and caregivers when I talk with them separately. So on that note, that was our experience. And if you are looking for FASD diagnostics for your kiddo, if it's something that you're considering for your individual, if you're in Florida, please reach out to us at the Florida Center we would be happy to help navigate if your loved one would qualify for one of our free evaluations, or if we need to explore the paid evaluation option for you. Also, if you're outside of Florida, the paid evaluations are an option. You could also connect with FASD United, and they can help point you in the direction of services that may be available in your state. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us on talking about our experience and getting a diagnosis and how that has helped us as caregivers. So until next time, you guys, thanks for showing up to the FASD Collective, where, as you know, we're going to be talking about the shifts that work, things getting us from survival, success, and everything in between. Have a great one.